the very thing that got you to be a high performer is the very thing that you have to let go of. So you have to let go of the control. You have to let go of thinking a certain way and acting a certain way and feeling a certain way, and then start to understand where you've conditioned your mind and your body to kind of be out of sync. That's the hard part, is actually rewiring how your brain works.
Welcome to the Friends with Benefits podcast, an Arcadia production. This is the show all about how to grow in business, lead with purpose, and live with intention. We're your co-hosting couple. I'm Jason.
And I'm Sam. Welcome to the show, friends.
Hi, everybody. It's Sam. Today's guest is actually really an interesting one, and we talk about the science of change, which in theory seems really easy, but in execution is a lot more complicated than we think. We often think that changing our environment or changing a relationship, getting a new job, like a physical change, is going to manifest the way that we want to feel in the world, and it's going to help us become the version of ourselves that we want to be. But our guest today, Jenn James, is teaching the neuroscience behind change. And she walks us through why that is not actually going to be a successful method for you. So if change is difficult, if there's things about yourself or reactions that you have or stories that you tell yourself that maybe aren't serving you in the best way possible, this might be an interesting conversation for you. Jenn is an Arcadian. She just shared a workshop of this sort with our Constellation membership, and many people said this was one of the best sessions that they've seen. So if that's of interest to you, you can check that out at bearcadia.com to join for more conversations like this. But for today's purposes, please enjoy our conversation with Jenn James. Jenn James, thanks for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm a huge fan of yours, of both of you.
We're a fan of yours. Is it required to, because you have such a great name, like is it required to say Jenn James? Because like it just goes so well together, and it's strong and it flows.
A lot of people do say that because there's also usually more than one Jenn in a room, so it's kind of required. I had some colleagues that used to call me J cubed.
J3?
Yep, J3.
Okay, wait, because I'm assuming, is James your married name?
It is.
We have a thing for J's in our family too. All of the males are J names.
In my family, yeah.
So
my dad is a J. My brothers, both of them are J. My son's a J.
Ours was by design.
Ours was, yeah.
Our son, Jack, but that was because we noticed the pattern. So I don't know. We have to do some family history digging on that. Okay, we have so much to cover today, and I want to actually get to it. Let's start with your story, because I think it's an interesting kind of parallel intro into the work that you do now and what brought you to do this work. So if you want to start there, let's start from the beginning.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know how far back you want to go, but I, have always been really interested in why we do what we do, why we act the way we act. And I think that started to form when I was in college and I took a consumer behavior class. And I thought it was so interesting, like how big companies get us, the consumers, to make certain choices. And then I went into marketing and ended up making a career for myself in marketing and working my way up to a vice president position of marketing at a multi-billion-dollar company. I was not always the smartest person in the room. I was usually just the hardest working, I guess you could say. So being in that kind of mentality of I know that I can work harder than everyone else. And when I work harder than everyone else, I can actually control the outcome. And that served me really well in my career. So I've worked at smaller SaaS tech companies around the 10 million mark, all the way up through the growth stage, around the $50 million to $200 million mark. And I've worked with multi-billion-dollar enterprises. And one of the things that I've noticed, no matter what size company you're in, that high performers, and I was a self-proclaimed high performer, and I was in the top 1% of people in the company that I worked for before I left corporate America. And what I noticed is that everyone has this way of using stress to fuel their outcome and control. So that eventually broke down, broke down in the sense of like, I just couldn't go anymore. I got burnt out and was told I had to take a leave of absence by a doctor. I did not want to take that leave. I felt like there was too much going on in the company. The company was going from public to private equity, and we had a lot of investments. I was in charge of multi-billions of dollars of revenue and multi-millions of dollars of budget, and we had a very lean team. And so because of that, I had to take the time because I knew that I couldn't keep going at the pace I was going because I was going to end up in a hospital. And while I was on that break, I had kind of like this epiphany, if you will, about this work, the neuroscience of change. I'd started learning about Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I started doing some of the meditations and reading all of his books. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is what has been missing. This is why I've been stuck. And so this is what it's going to take to change. So that's what brought me to this work. And it actually did help. I started doing the work. And then in that process, instead of going back to that corporate job, being a VP of marketing, I was just like, I know there's a lot of people out there that are dealing with burnout and anxiety and depression, but they're still high performers. And I know they're in pain, like I was, and it's an incredibly painful process. How do you step away from your entire identity as that corporate marketer to now become like someone who helps people overcome that for themselves?
I'm very curious because like you got to the place of burnout, like you had to go see a doctor apparently, right?
Yeah.
Can you walk us through like what that actually felt like and how did it showcase and at what stage you knew you had to go see somebody?
It started showing up physically. I probably had signs for years before this, but I just kept saying, I'll do this when, I'll take a vacation when, I can, take my foot off the gas when. I kept saying that to myself. Like there was always another thing that would happen or another resource that would get taken away or another big thing that would happen. And so it started showing up physically. That's when it really, I guess, got my attention with a lot of heart. Like I felt like someone was constantly sitting on my heart. There was so much pain in my heart. And it's like I couldn't breathe deeply. I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. So I went to a doctor and the doctor was like, oh, your heart's fine.
As like, all women with chest pain should. Disclaimer.
And so they said all the tests they did, you're perfectly fine. I'm like, no, I'm not. So
something is wrong.
I was having nightmares. Like there was a lot of physical manifestations of all that stress. And not to mention that I was not really taking any breaks. I didn't even recognize it. But what I think the other thing that I recognize is that some of the thoughts I was having in my head, I started hearing my child say, and I thought that's really strange. Like that my thoughts and maybe some of my behaviors are being passed on to my children. And that's became kind of a wake-up call. Like, okay, this is not okay. I do not want this to be my life. And when we tie so much of our identity to our career, and then we just feel like that's the cost to be a high performer, it becomes easy for us to say, well, okay, well, the stress is just the cost of high performance job and getting to the next level when it's not. It's actually doing a lot of damage.
Let's dig in there a little bit because I think that Jenn just came to the Constellation, the Arcadia community, and did an awesome session with our crew. And this was one of the things we talked about, how stress is basically like the cost of admission to being a high performer or having like a high profile, an executive career, whatever you want to call it. You're saying that's not. However, I feel like I have felt this. I felt like many of the Arcadians felt this, that like, how is that not possible? Because society basically is like, yeah, this is just what you have to do to earn that job, to earn that title, to earn whatever it is.
It is something that every high performer I've ever worked with and worked, alongside or noticed in my bosses is that stress just feels like the price of admission. And, really smart people get stuck just repeating the same cycles. And, that's the paradox that these smart people, they know that they want to change, but they still can't change because they think that, they can kind of productivity or strategize their way out of it. But you're not going to solve this kind of challenge with just your thoughts alone. So the realization is that the problem isn't just knowledge. You can't just get more information and then all of a sudden, be better. That there's a conditioning process that takes place in the body when you've been running those specific thought patterns, those loops of thinking and feeling a certain way for years or decades. And so the very thing that got you to be a high performer is the very thing that you have to let go of. So you have to let go of the control. You have to let go of thinking a certain way and acting a certain way and feeling a certain way, and then start to understand where you've conditioned your mind and your body to kind of be out of sync. That's the hard part, is actually rewiring how your brain works, and then also what that means in your body chemically. Like, what are the chemical messages that your body's getting? And then how have you become conditioned to behave a certain way or to act a certain way? There's no easy way out. There's no easy button. Now, the way of getting out of it is simple, but it's not easy.
I know you just kind of walked through a little bit, but like you mentioned at the beginning of your story there, like the neuroscience of change and the work that Joe is doing. Like, can you give us a quick explanation of what the neuroscience of change actually means for those who may not be super familiar?
The core truth behind change lies in this idea that your personality creates your personal reality. And your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So the present personality that's sitting here today, called you, has created your present personal reality called your life, which means if you want to change your life, then you have to start thinking about what you've been thinking about, start becoming aware of all those behaviors and actions that you have, and become so conscious of the feelings that you have that you want to go unconscious to them. So if you're thinking the same way, acting the same way, feeling the same way, then you're going to stay the same. And if you start to think differently, if you start to act differently, if you start to feel differently, that's when you can start to change. That's the kind of the core premise of the teaching. And then there's the methodology behind, okay, well, what does that actually mean?
We've all heard the quote, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over. Yet when it comes to our day-to-day life, it's not that obvious that we're doing the same thing over and over. Because as you've mentioned, these are like thought processes or things that we've just naturally become conditioned to that just become second nature. We don't even realize that we have a script playing in our head that makes my reality different from Jason's, from yours in this very moment right here. So yeah, I do think it would be interesting. Can you give us an example of what does that even look like for somebody, for a high performer who's like, yeah, I'm doing everything I need to be doing, but I'm exhausted and this doesn't feel good anymore. Like, what do they do?
The thing about stress is that initially it serves a purpose, right? When you think about when you have a stress response, it's getting your body ready to fight or hide or freeze. So it's that fight or flight response, or that sympathetic response. But in order to overcome that state, you have to go from a very narrow focus to a broad focus. And when we are in that stress state, all of our attention is on our environment, our body, and time. And you're thinking about all the people, all the objects, all the things at certain times and places. And because you're thinking about all those things, all these different neurological networks are starting to fire and fire in the brain, and it becomes very incoherent. So what's happening is that the environment starts to cause you to become very fixed in the way that you're thinking and feeling. And the body, like I said before, becomes conditioned into the response. So you can just get a Slack message from your boss. And if that boss is the person that stresses you out, then as soon as that Slack message comes through, you're going to start having a stress response.
Before you even read it.
Yeah, before you even read it. You just see it pop up, you hear the sound, you know it's that person. All it takes is a thought and a feeling, a memory and emotion, a stimulus and response, and that's going to condition your body to start to react before you even have a chance to choose for yourself who you want to be in that moment. And so in time is the other element that we become obsessed with when we're in a stress response. So it's all about time. I don't have enough time, or I don't have time for this, or, there's always something. And that's based on all the experiences that you've had before, because your brain starts to predict what's going to happen as a result of that. And so again, we start to narrow that focus and become very, judgmental or resentful or angry, and you start having all these limited emotions. And now you can't see the forest through the trees, so to speak. You're just so focused on the specific problem. And so what you have to do is learn how to broaden your focus, open your focus, instead of becoming narrow, instead of the diverging convergent focus. That is what allows you to change your brain waves from this very high beta brainwave state into a brainwave state where you can be more creative, imaginative. And that is what allows you to respond differently. But before that even happens, you have to recognize that you're getting ready, or you're in a loop. You're about to run a loop, and start to use some tools that I teach in the workshop that I do, and with the coaching I do with clients, starting to use those tools so that you can master the moment instead of the moment mastering you.
I love that. I mean, I've heard you say this before, and I'm not going to quote it correctly, but when you said this to me, it really stuck. It's like the story of your past is dictating your present and your future. So to stick with that example, you get a Slack message, you get a Slack notification, and immediately your brain goes, my boss is a dick. This is going to be terrible. I'm going to lose my job, or whatever that story is you're telling yourself. And then all of a sudden, your body then owns that feeling, owns that reality. And sure enough, it becomes your reality. But we had a very similar conversation with Mara Olson. I was just going to call her Mara, and then I had to add the disclaimers. But we have to be open to the possibility of a moment, because when we come into it with that past pretense, we've already decided what the moment's going to be. And then our body reacts with this stress response before we even know what the moment actually has to unfold.
That's right. That's exactly what happens. And from a brain perspective, what's happening is you have a certain thought and you turn on that network in your brain. And then you have another thought that turns on another network in your brain, neurological network in your brain. And then you have another thought. So usually they come and it's not just one thought. You have 3 to 5 thoughts that kind of just go boom, boom, boom. You may not even be aware of it. And then they start to trigger different neurological networks in your brain. And what that does, if you accept, believe, and surrender to the image that's created in your mind, then you're going to produce a chemical. And that chemical, that neurotransmitter, is going to produce a neuropeptide, which is a chemical that's going to travel down your spinal cord to a specific hormonal center, which is going to cause you to feel a certain way. And so now with anger, for example, that's going to go around to where your adrenal glands are. And your mind's going to check in with your body, and it's going to say, yes, you're very angry. It's going to start to, fire and wire in a specific sequence, pattern, and combination. When the brain fires in tandem like that, it's going to continue to, pull up an image of who you think you are. You're going to accept, believe, and surrender to that, produce more of those chemicals, and that loop will just keep happening over and over and over. And then you start to get really angry. And what happens is people, when they're in that, we call it the refractory period of that response, they're not seeing things the way it really is. They're seeing the way you start to see things how you are, not the way things truly are. If you send that email, you call that person, you're always going to regret your response. It's going to deliver the same results. And, people start to get addicted to the chemicals of that response because it starts to make them feel like them. That's like, oh, this is just, I hear this all the time. This is just who I am. I'm just an anxious person. They'll say, I am this way because of this thing that happened to me. And really what they're saying is that they're a victim to that situation. They've memorized that emotion and they continue to think and feel that way to continue to be the same. They basically give up their power to that circumstance or that situation, when being able to stop that reaction, to become aware of it and to stop it, that is emotional intelligence. And what we need more so than anything, I think, ever in time is people to become more emotionally intelligent. Just because they have a thought doesn't mean it's true. You have to be able to just start to step back and see things as it's happening and start to get really curious as to why you're even thinking that way and feeling that way. What is it?
Writing a little bit after I worked out the other morning, it was like our demons hide in our patterns, right? And I think that's part of why we're so afraid to address them, or why we're so afraid to even look and see what parts of us are hiding in those patterns, because they're kind of scary. They can be. To use your point earlier, that's what's gotten you to where you're at now, and that's the place that you've got to begin changing. That begins to get a little bit scary, right? And my question from here is how do we begin to change this? Even someone who's acknowledged it, you can acknowledge it, but you can still get so locked into that one little point of the day, that one little Slack message, right? And I saw this the other day. It's one little thing can happen that can take control of your entire day, and that one little piece is just that one little piece of the day. But to use your words, how do we begin to broaden our focus? Got to begin to change.
So, there's a couple different things that come to me as you say that. The first thing is that you have to start to become defined by a vision of the future. And most people, they think about oh, I want this to change in my life, and I want this new house, and I want this new car, and I want this new job, I want the promotion, I want whatever. But they don't think about how they have to change to get that. What do you really want? Who do you really want to be? Not just what do you want to have, who do you want to be? And so if you can start to get clear on who is the future version of you that doesn't react when that Slack message comes through, that's not, a victim to the patterns that they've created over years or decades. So who is that? You have to start to find who the future version of you is. And then the other side of that is, well, who am I today? What aspects of myself can I get clear on the thoughts that I'm having? Am I even aware of the thoughts that I'm having? Most people are just 95% of who they are by the time they're 35 years old is a set of, habits, unconditioned responses that, just allow them to show up as the same person every single day. And if we think 60, 70,000 thoughts in one day, and 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts that you had yesterday, then it's going to be really hard to change if you are just trying to use a very small portion of your awareness to change a very big part of who you are. So start to understand how you're thinking. What choices are you making? What are the actions and behaviors that you are, exhibiting every single day? What are the experiences that those create, and how are you feeling? Because if you keep showing up as the same person, then your biology, your neurocircuitry, your neurochemistry, your hormones, and your gene expression even stays the same because you're staying the same. But if you start to learn new information, you start to have that vision of the future. Who am I? go out and find the information about that, start to understand it philosophically. But that's not enough. You have to take that information now and start to make new choices, have new actions and behaviors that create new experiences that will produce new feelings and emotions. And that's how you evolve. That's how you evolve in this same lifetime. But the challenge is that it's incredibly uncomfortable to do that.
I think one of the things that I want to call out from what you said, and I've heard you say this, I've heard other people say this, and it really resonates with me, but the thing that you're chasing is not actually the thing. It's the feeling that you think you'll have when you get the thing. And so, I was talking to somebody the other day and they were looking for a new job, and the new job was going to require a lot of them, like a ton of travel away from their family, all this. And I asked them, I was like, well, what are you hoping to feel like when you have that new job? And what's preventing you from feeling that way in your current job? Because the job's not going to give you that. You're still going to be the same person in that new job. And now you just have all of these other elements on top of your life that make it more difficult. And so I think that's what people often chase. But I would love to hear your perspective on this. I'm not great at it, but when I do remember, I like to think about, how do I want to feel? And then I ask myself, what would a person who feels that way do right now? It's just really rewiring our body to feel the way we want to feel so we can make the choices we want to make to get the outcomes we want to get.
A big piece of that is being able to be a different person. So with new thoughts, new actions and behaviors, that create those new experiences, have new feelings within the same circumstances, within the same conditions, without your environment changing. So often people want to change their environment. They want to change jobs or relationships or whatever it is, but they haven't changed. And so, they will continue to almost like seek out similar circumstances that will just continue to reaffirm like who they are. And they work for a short period of time. Like you get the new job, you're feeling really good. Like you have like all these new things that are happening, but then sure enough, within a short period of time, you'll start to feel a certain way again. You'll start to have that same anxiety or those same anger issues or impatience or frustration or whatever it is. Those hormones of stress will start to take over again. And you just continue down that path for, years and years and years, or your entire lifetime, perhaps. So it's like, how much pain do you have to go through before you start to make a different choice and to show up differently in your life? So that's the big part of it. And then the other side is being able to actually change your brain waves. So in high beta, it's like a lightning storm in the clouds because you're constantly going from one person to another object, to another thing, to another, it's just a constant firing and wiring of incoherently. And when the brain is incoherent, you're incoherent. And when the brain isn't working right, you're not working right. And so you have to slow your brain waves down. And one of the ways that you do that is through breath. You can just start to become aware of your breath and slow it down and start to become aware of like where you are and not in this situation, in this circumstance, in the stressful moment. Like you can be doing this in the midst of like a very stressful like situation. You don't have to go into the feeling of it, of that stress. You can remove yourself from it and just start to think differently and feel differently.
Jay, I have to share this really quick because somebody shared this with me the other day, and I think it was also, I tried to teach this to our 6-year-old. He's like, I already know how to do that, Mom. But do you know what 5-finger breathing is, Jen?
5-finger breathing? No, I don't know if I've heard it that way, but describe it.
I'll do my best to describe to listeners, but you hold your hand up or under a table, wherever. This does not have to be like a visual thing for people, but you just trace your hand with your opposite. So when you go up, your thumb, you take a breath in, and then when you go down, you take a breath out, and you keep going around your whole hand. So on the upstroke, you breathe in, on the downstroke, you breathe out. And I love that moment or that teaching because it's like, yeah, you get the slack and just take a minute, just trace your hand and breathe. It takes 10 seconds. And, that's the moment of reaction that you can be like, okay, I am not the response to this. I have a choice in this moment. And, when you say change, I feel like people are often like, yeah, I did change. I got a new job. I started working out. It's like all these additive things. And that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about something so much more internal.
I like it. So it also too is like it's a refocus. Like I think about times where I might feel those feelings of stress, and I have to assume a lot of other people may do the same. Like sometimes if we're really kind of feeling overwhelmed, what are we going to do? Like we might pick up this thing and kind of like scroll for a minute and outsource some happiness to a channel or to someone else, or try to get it from something else instead of like really like being in the moment, refocusing, reshifting. If you're doing the 5-finger thing, it's something very tactical, very much something you got to focus on and think about, and then come back to it. Take those few moments, those 30 seconds, instead of looking for some other form of happiness, but go internal for a second, breathe. And what I was going to ask Jen is like, we've got breathing. Like, are there any other practices that you would suggest to start doing to make this feel more natural in those moments or in this shift? Because when you're saying things like you have to change your brain waves, that feels very hard. And maybe take some time to do so, right? And for some people, they can feel very abstract. And yes, 100% possible. But as we're thinking about this and we're listening, I'm listening. What are those practices that you're seeing works?
Yeah. So even just the 5-finger exercise, that breath that you just mentioned, Sam, that alone will change your brainwaves. So if we were to hook you up, we would see that you would move from high beta to like a mid range or a low beta, possibly even alpha if you got really into it. And what that means is that you're moving from your outer world being more real than your inner world to your inner world starting to become more real and imaginative. And it's a very creative state. So that one tool, there's some others that we teach, but just using that one tool is hugely helpful. And then also being able to know when you're about to run a loop and being able to stop that and change what you're thinking and being able to do it in the moment so that you don't become, run that loop again, that pattern again. So that is what allows you. So you use the breath to slow yourself down. Now you use your brain to start to be different in the moment. And the other tool that I teach is meditation or mental rehearsal. So, sometimes there's a negative connotation to that because people have tried it before and it didn't work for them. And I was actually one of those people. Many years ago, I tried meditating and I was like, I just can't do it. I can't quiet my mind. And when I went down this path with Dr. Joe Dispenza, doing his meditations, what I learned and what I was taught is that the brain becomes like an animal that you have to train. And so you start to like, well, this person and that happened. And then I would notice that when I would close my eyes and start to do this meditation, I would have all these thoughts start coming up. And then I just remember, oh yeah, Dr. Joe said, oh, you just have to bring yourself back, like, whew, back to center. Okay. And then get back into it. And the way that these meditations work is actually to rewire your brain. So right. I feel like I'm actually still being productive because in that meditation, you're actually accessing the part of your brain where you can rewrite a new program. So most people don't realize is that 5% of your mind is your conscious mind and 95% of your mind is your subconscious or your unconscious mind. And so in order to get beyond your conscious mind, you have to get past your analytical mind. And in order to do that, you slow your brain waves down. You can do that breath and you start to open your focus. So go from a divergent focus to a convergent focus. So you open it up, get into that new state where you can start to rewire your brain and rewrite a new program. Like, who do you want to be? How does that person think, act, and feel? What experiences do they have? When you're confronted with that same Slack message that comes through, what's the tool that you're going to use? Because it's going to happen again. And how are you now going to respond? I'm not saying that you can't ever respond or have a reaction. It's just how long are you going to allow that reaction to take over?
That point's interesting. Like, I wonder if there's any science benefit or whatever. It's like, all right, I feel like I've heard this before on other shows, but like, I'm going to give myself 2 minutes to react here. I'm going to allow myself that time, 2 minutes. I'm going to, whatever, embrace it, feel it, experience it. Then I'm just going to move on. Can you convince yourself, and convince the brain to be like, all right, this is the time we're going to give it, and then just move from there? Is there any advantage to that?
That's exactly right. That's what you have to do. You have to say to yourself, how long am I going to allow this to take over? Because it feels like in the beginning, it feels good.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the effect of this on others around you. Because this has been very internal thus far, which is great. And everybody needs to start there. That is one of our core principles of Arcadia. But how does like a leader's unprocessed stress show up and maybe subconsciously build their team's culture?
Every single company has some resemblance of this in their culture, especially if you are being affected by the pace of change. And I think every single industry, no matter how big you are, everyone's going through some kind of major change initiative or transformation. The cultures are made up of individuals.
Wait, you mean it's not values on their website?
It's not values on your website. I mean, you can talk about your values and your mission, but if people are not, actually behaving in accordance with those values, or if it's just basically, it's not real, it's not really truly reflective of what is possible, then people will choose to have their own little stress loops that they run. And they're going to find people in the company that they're going to, quote unquote, meet around the water cooler, and they're going to complain and have those similar, limiting thoughts and feelings together. So
Yeah.
that's what shapes the culture. And oftentimes leaders, they think they have a shared vision, but it's just a limited group within the company who has the vision or has a mission, but then everyone else is calling bullshit on it. They can think of 1,000 reasons why that change or transformation is not going to work. And so it does have this ripple effect because there's this disconnect between what's possible, what they think is possible, and what actually is possible, because people start to get stuck in the status quo. And when you have an inflammatory culture or a toxic culture, that you're not going to be able to achieve specific outcomes because everyone's going to be limited in what's possible. When you're living in stress, you're living in survival. And when you're living in survival, you're in that high beta brainwave state and you're not seeing things the way they truly are. And so a lot of people are showing up to work stressed out, burnt out, limited. And so the culture, as a result of that, is not going to be very innovative, collaborative. They're not going to solve problems the way they would if they were able to take a step back. What is the vision for the specific departments in the company? How does that ladder up to the bigger vision? And then can those individuals within that department actually see that? Who do they have to become in order for that to actually work? So it is a way to break this down. It does start with the individuals, it ladders up to the organization, but then the departments within the company also have to have their specific vision, and everyone needs to understand, how they're a part of that and how they need to show up and what they need to do in order to achieve that. And when you get all of those different departments working together, now you're in a state of emergence. Now the whole flock is moving as one. And no matter what they're faced with, no matter what the circumstances are, the conditions, the pressures, the whatever, they're going to be able to respond to that in a whole new way. They're going to think differently. They're going to respond differently. And I think that is truly the future of how organizations will have to grow, because change is not stopping anytime soon. It's just going to keep going.
And the stress is going to keep mounting, especially like in the world that we live in, from
That we're
the
creating.
tech world at least, and we create. Yeah, we create that stress ourselves. And I love the take of like you addressing it from a leadership standpoint, and because of all that stress that's coming from the top down, we live in fear. And that is not a conducive environment for anybody to thrive in, to do their best work in. So like to address this stuff, I think is the most important work we could do from a leadership perspective right now. We kind of kicked the whole conversation off by talking about like the work you did and how you got into that. Like I'd be interested in come back into that and kind of understand more of like what you've noticed in yourself since starting this work.
I'm a whole different person than I was 5 years ago. It was around this time 5 years ago that I had to take that leave of absence, and I am an entirely different person. Before, I was very reactive. I was very angry all the time. I was constantly blaming others. I was a victim to my boss and to my environment and to my circumstances, and often would have conversations with myself like, if only this person wasn't there. It was just, there was just a lot of limiting emotions. I became very self-centered, self-important, so on and so forth. So I was a limited version of who I am today. And now I would say I wouldn't say I'm done. I'm certainly not fixed and perfect. I still have a lot that I need to overcome, but I can tell you that I live most of my life in states of awe and joy and gratitude. I'm very creative. I do a lot of things that are creative now because I know how important it is to prepare for the day when I know it's going to be really challenging. I'm a better mom too, to my 3 kids. I have 3 young children, and they're at ages where, it can be really tough, the way that they speak and what they expect. And so being able to use the tools to actually slow myself down and respond as the mom that I want to be. Sometimes have to pinch myself because I feel like I've been given an entire new chance at life. And it took me, in many ways, dying, which is very, very hard, to confront all the aspects of yourself who have to die and go away, and all the biological rewiring that has to happen in order for a new self to emerge. And so that biological, change is very difficult, but it's worth it because life is so much better now for me personally. I still have a lot that I'm overcoming. I'm not perfect by any means. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be part of Arcadia and the Constellation, because I know that you're with a group of people who share that similar desire to become better, to be great, to just keep evolving. I want to be around people like that.
Coach this and teach this for individuals and organizations. Talk about some of that work and how does this look if somebody wants to work with you, and what kind of work are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a B2B marketing agency that I'm slowly walking away from in order to dedicate my time completely to teaching the neuroscience of change. And so I've worked with mostly individuals, but this is really designed to be brought into companies. I've been trained by Dr. Joe Dispenza and certified to teach his work to companies. I have a website that I just launched recently. It's Jenn with 2 N's James.io. So if anyone is interested in learning more, you can check that out and reach out, and I can come and do a talk with your organization to help you understand where there may be some patterns that are running that are limiting you and your team from achieving that next level of success. And, again, change is not slowing down anytime soon. So if you want to wait until something breaks, then you can do that and prepare, your team for what's next. So yeah, I do coaching for individuals. I love working with individuals too, because then it's not being forced. Like the people that I want to work with want to change and it not be a flavor of the month for the company to say, well, you have to do this. It's that you
Our
actually
KPIs this month are brainwaves.
Right.
our brain changes.
It-
No, it's not.
Hard to force somebody to change or acknowledge that they need to change if they're not there or ready, I would imagine.
right.
So when they come to you, like they need that change.
You have to want to change. You have to, a lot of times it's because someone's so stuck and it's causing them so much pain. They've tried everything else. And now it's like, now what? Like, I feel like it's just not possible. Well, okay. So let's learn about why that is and how to make it possible. So when you understand the what and the why, then the how becomes easier. And so I help people with how.
Jen, this has been amazing. I found myself taking notes yet again. It's a very timely conversation. These are a lot of the thoughts that I've been having, I've been thinking about and considering, and a lot of things we also talk about inside of Arcadia. So I'm super grateful for you to come and kind of share your expertise and thoughts and giving us a reframe on how we kind of broaden our focus and focus on our patterns.
If there's anything else I could do to help you, I know sometimes you have to hear this many times in order for it to start to stick. I highly encourage anyone who's interested to just start becoming aware of who they are.
And stress is not admission to the job. That's not how it has to be.
It's not table stakes,
right.
despite what people tell you.
Yeah. Well, Jen, thank you so much. Everybody go follow Jen on LinkedIn. Go check out her new website. I'm here to say that this work is truly transformational. So we're so grateful that you spent your afternoon with us. And yeah, we're rooting for you. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm rooting for you too. I love everything you're doing.
All right, friends. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being here.
See y'all.